What's going on, everyone? It is the Derf, and in today's video we are going to go through a well-lock build that not only puts out huge support for your team no matter what activity you are running, but it also deals ridiculous damage, and we are pairing this build with Eunoia. Now, typically when we deal with Eunoia, we are thinking about just spamming the Hellion and carrying on with our day, but when we are pairing this with a well, suddenly everything for some reason just gets easier. And I've been switching between this build as well as a couple of my other leveling builds, and this thing is starting to take over what I'm taking into higher end content. So if you've been looking for a way to incorporate Eunoia as well as your favorite well lock, support your team as well as deal huge damage numbers, get ready because this build is for you. Let's go. To get us started on our solar well lock leveling build, our super of choice is going to be Well of Radiance. Thrust your sword into the ground, damaging and scorching nearby targets. The sword projects a continuous aura, granting radiant effects and restoration to nearby allies, protecting them from the effects of stasis. So restoration, you regenerate health and shields over time. It cannot be interrupted by taking damage. And radiant, of course, is your weapons are enhanced by the power of the traveler and deal increased damage to combatants. While you are radiant, your weapons pierce the shields of barrier champs and stun them. That is any weapon, regardless of weapon type. For abilities, I really like the Phoenix Dive, Burst Glide. I prefer the Incinerator Snap, and I personally prefer the Fusion Grenade, although if you prefer a different grenade, basically any one of these will work, I guess including the Healing Grenade if that's really what you want to do. For aspects, first up is going to be Touch of Flame. Your Healing, Solar, Firebolt, and Fusion Grenades have enhanced functionality. For my Fusion Grenades, they explode twice. The other reason why I like using Fusion Grenades with Touch of Flame is it's basically a guaranteed stun on any unstoppable champion. Next up, we've got the Hellion. Activate your class ability to summon a solar mortar that lobs flame projectiles at distant targets. Targets damaged by the mortar are scorched. This is going to pair beautifully with our exotic armor of choice, and I'm not sure why I didn't think of combining this with a well before, but once we go through the weapons, all of these things are just going to make you a damage machine on top of being an extremely supportive role in your fire team. For fragments, first up on the list is Ember of Ashes. You apply more scorch stacks to targets. That means from your Hellion, your weapons, your grenade, your melee, anything and everything applies more scorch stacks, boom, right off the bat. Ember of Searing, next up. Defeating scorched targets grants melee energy and creates a fire sprite. Plus 10 to class. I'm taking advantage of all the things that are involved with this fragment. Being able to essentially regenerate your abilities by yourself by just doing regular everyday things that you would normally do with a warlock that is using solar makes this build kind of a self-rejuvenating build, if you will. Next up, we've got Ember of Solace. This fragment is probably the most required in this build, specifically the part about the increased duration of the radiant and restoration effects. Not only do you get a lot more time for being radiant, but also for restoration. When you activate restoration, you get additional tick down time for your restoration, if that makes sense. And of course, while you're radiant, you can pierce barrier champs' bubbles even longer and deal additional weapon damage. Last but not least is going to be Ember of Singeing. Your class ability recharges faster when you scorch targets. So this is rounding out our selection here. We have our class ability recharging faster when we scorch targets. We have defeating scorched targets grants melee energy and a fire sprite. Oh, by the way, fire sprites grant what? Grenade energy. Exactly. So between this and this, Ember of Singeing and Ember of Searing, you are going to basically be self-printing your abilities back to you as you're literally self-printing your abilities upon the enemies of the traveler, so to speak. And oh, by the way, once you gain enough super energy, that's going to be the icing of the cake, because you can regenerate your super as you're regenerating all these other things at the same time. So all of these things feed in together, which is why this is such a, not that people don't know how good Well Lock is, but when you typically think of Well Lock, you're not thinking about it in terms of leveling, you know, especially in the power grind for the portal activities and Edge of Fate. You're thinking about more like, hey, I'm running a raid. We need a well. Who's going to be the well? No, this takes that out. And whether you are solo or with a fire team, you're going to benefit, I think, equally from this build, regardless of the activity that you're running in. For stat distribution, I recommend focusing on weapons, grenade, and melee in that order. The reason I say that those things are important is because your super, if you can get your super to an even 100, anything over 100 is probably going to be pointless. But there's nothing sitting here saying that you have to have your super at 100. This is just kind of how it rolled for me. In a perfect scenario, I would probably have my super somewhere in the 80 range, my melee and my grenade over at maybe a 90 plus, my class ability at least a 75 or an 80. Yes, that means I have to have some very specific roles within my archetypes to be able to achieve that. So the trade-off that I made was having my grenade and melee be at least at a 70, which I was able to accomplish, and then some, so I get increased regeneration back on those, and having my class ability, which again is like 30 seconds at full cooldown, at somewhere close to a 70. And keep in mind, I'm using tier 3 armor in 2 slots and tier 4 armor in 2 slots. I don't have any tier 5s built into this. And oh, by the way, I'm using an exotic. So if you have better armor rolls than I do, higher tier rolls than I do, if you have things like the tuning aspect available to you, you could easily twist these stats up to formulate some kind of variation of what I just described. But it is imperative to try to get your weapons over a 100. If you can get your weapons closer to like 125 and have the next four, the next 4 stats above them be somewhere between, 75 to maybe 95, it's going to work just as well as what I do. When it comes to, anything over 100 is going to add a little bit of extra time to the duration of your super, because it doesn't correlate directly with damage, because it's not a super that damages anything, really. So anything over 100, you're talking like a tenth of a second. It's really not that big of a deal. So 100, 101, 102, 103, okay, that's fine. You start getting up above 105, you've got some wasted stats. So take the next step down, which would be like a 95 if you have to go minus 10, for example. You'll do just fine with that. For weapons, first up, and probably the most important on this list, is going to be Outbreak Perfected. The reason Outbreak Perfected works so well here is when you use this within your well, outside of a very good heavy weapon, Outbreak Perfected is virtually unlimited and uncapped DPS. And why that is because when you roll this thing with rewind rounds and combine that with the disease vector as well as the parasitism, you have essentially a weapon that not only when it pairs with Tech-Sec armor breaks shields on enemies and then has a disorienting blast, but also does increased tick damage because of the nanites you spawn on rapid hits. So add to that the fact that Outbreak is already hitting like a truck. And oh, by the way, the nanites, in case you didn't know this, count as weapon damage, which means they scale with weapon damage. So just think about that in your head when you're using Outbreak in general. You're like, whoa, why is this thing hitting like a truck? The nanites count as weapon damage. They scale to that. Osteo doesn't do that, and Thorn doesn't do that. That's why they're not hitting like Outbreak. Also, the fact that Outbreak's a featured weapon and those two aren't. But Outbreak Perfected is literally, I know it's going to be your backup DPS option, but it is also the reason why you don't need to worry about running out of heavy ammo during a boss phase. Use your heavy ammo. You'll definitely get a little bit more damage out of it, but then quickly switch to your Outbreak and don't look back. You'll be fine. Next up is going to be Ahab Char. I personally like this with Burning Ambition and Heal Clip. There's people out there that will give you their own personal opinion of what the ideal role is, but this one has been working good for me, especially the enhanced version, which is really important. That means that you have to dump less rounds into the enemy to actually get them scorched. Keep in mind, our class, we're getting abilities back as we scorch targets. So all of these things are adding up to helping us get our main source of energy back. So yes, you're going to be using Outbreak Perfected a lot, but Ahab Char, you're going to be using on, like no-name weapons, of course, using this to help stun overload champs, and all those things that compare with the artifact. But realistically, if you don't have any Scorch going on at all, which believe me, you're going to have plenty of Scorch with your Hellion, you can use Ahab Char to continue adding Scorch stacks to beefy targets. I'm thinking like Briggs, bosses, overload champs, even unstoppable champs. It all works for them. So just kind of keep that in mind when you're wondering like, well, he said that I'm going to be using Outbreak for DPS a lot of times, but we're not using Sanguine and we're not using this. So how are we getting all of our abilities back? This is how you're swapping between Outbreak and Ahab Char. In the heavy slot, it is completely up to you what you want to use. Opaque Hourglass is the hardest hitting heavy legendary weapon in the game right now. It is a champ killer once you get to like a tier 3 or a tier 4 role. You want elemental honing, you want explosive bolts, and that's pretty much all you really need. You've won the game if you got that. So I understand that requires you to farm Desert Perpetual, which isn't high on everybody's list of things they want to do. So if you don't have this, you can throw on either Boomslang 4FR, or I don't have it on here, but just trust me, Outrageous Fortune. Both of these are hitting like trucks as well, but Opaque Hourglass is definitely a couple of steps above. So here we go, Eunoia. Don't worry, I looked up on Google how to pronounce that. That is the correct pronunciation, Eunoia. Console's pitch. Hellion projectiles deal increased damage the further they travel, eventually fracturing into scorching shrapnel. This is going to be the main source of starting all your Scorch, is this right here. All of your Scorch is going to feed into your ability to reproc your abilities. It's going to be very common with this build, how I've got it set up, that you are going to be able to activate a Hellion before your current Hellion runs out. That's how good it is when you get to higher end content. I'm thinking like 300 plus. When you're running Master and higher, your Hellion is basically, without you even trying, refreshing your abilities for you. And every time you create a fire sprite, every time you scorch a target, every time all these things are happening, you're doing things like printing Orbs of Power, you're doing things like getting your super back faster, you're doing things like getting restoration. All those things add up to basically make you able to play the game at your own pace. There's going to be times, sure, where you're going to have to take some cover. You can't just sit there with your Hellion out in the open like a goofball, thinking that, you're going to be able to take down 20 enemies that are in front of you that are at master or higher level, strength. However, it's going to be pretty darn close, because thanks to your ability regenerating, as well as restoration and radiant effects extending the duration that they are applied to you, you won't be far off from being able to technically do that. Again, the situation is going to dictate how you play, but when you get to higher level content, you need a way to be able to slow the game down a little bit so that you can play at your pace and not feel like either A, you're overwhelmed or outgunned or outnumbered if you're running solo ops, or if you're in a fire team and let's say it's a matchmade activity and your teammates just aren't quite as aggressive as you'd like them to be, so you feel like you're carrying more of the load. Or maybe, you want to try to carry more of the load. This exotic, paired with Well, will absolutely give you that ability. Because when all else fails, you can pop your Hellion, you can slam your Well down, and then you can use your Hellion at the same time as dumping DPS, dumping damage into a boss. And all you're doing is adding to the eventual destruction of that single target. So you can use this to clear out a crowd, you can use this to wear down the boss, but when you do pop your super, your Outbreak and your heavy weapons are going to do a ton more damage even if you're not using Sanguine. And I know I've mentioned that a couple of times, though I don't typically make it a point to mention other exotics within build videos. But I'm telling you, this Eunoia build is way different than the other one that I came up with previous. Because the other one I came up with previous, I wanted to roam around with Dawnblade. This one is more of a point, shoot, stand, observe, and then support your overall team. And I honestly think it hits better. But you guys can let me know in the comments what you think. You know, how this might differ from your Eunoia build, or if you're even trying out well with Eunoia. I know I'm not the first person to put these two things together, but I was pretty shocked when I just kind of made a random idea, you know, and it started to make sense. So hopefully you guys will kind of see the logic if you do try this out in the harder content. As far as the rest of the build, go ahead and spec into whatever general armor stat you need, general armor mod that you need in the first column. For the helmet, you're going to want to put on one heavy ammo finder. You're also going to want to put on a kinetic siphon and a solar siphon. Don't worry if your heavy ammo weapon does not generate orbs of power. You don't need it for that. In the second column, go ahead and put on one firepower, one heavy-handed, and of course, fastball. For the chest armor, make sure you put on 2 damage resistance mods, and make sure you're throwing on an arc ammo generation mod. If it is an arc weapon in your heavy slot, if it is like Outrageous Fortune, you can switch this out for solar. In the legs, make sure you're putting on 1 innervation, 1 invigoration, and 1 absolution. Now, you could make an argument to maybe swap out the invigoration, since that is technically a longer cooldown in general anyways, for a insulation if you want to get your Hellion back even faster. But I'm telling you, I have regularly procced a Hellion before my current Hellion runs out with this build, because I'm generating so much scorch damage that I'm getting my class ability back without the help of an orb of power. And that's why you want to try to get your armor somewhere around a 70 for your class stat, because you'll be able to do that. Heck, if you can get around 100, you'll be able to do it even faster than I can. Lastly, for the Warlock Bond, make sure you put on a Reaper, because you're going to be spamming your class ability. Make sure you throw on the class font so you can get a plus 20 with a single orb pickup to your class stat ability. And then round it out, I believe, with a Bomber is most fun, because again, it has the shortest cooldown between your other 2 abilities. For the artifact, we're going to be taking advantage of most of what I've got selected on the screen. You want to make sure you have on Anti-Barrier Scout and Pulse. You also want to make sure you have on Overload Rapid Fire. Now, if you are going up against an Unstoppable and you want a weapon to be able to deal with that, you can throw on an Unstoppable Sidearm and then put a Solar Sidearm in your energy slot. It just won't work as well for the Scorch aspect, but it'll still be functional. In the second column, make sure you put on Flame, Fiber, and Freeze. In the third column, make sure you put on Fever and Chill, Elemental Benevolence, because you are going to be granting allies elemental buffs when you throw your well down, which is going to give you additional class ability energy. And then Refresh Threads, picking up an elemental orb or elemental pickup while your subclass element or tangle, while you have a strand super, grants energy to your least charged ability. So again, regenerating your abilities even faster. Make sure you throw on Elemental Coalescence in the fourth column so that you can create that extra elemental pickup that matches your solar super. Make sure you throw on Elemental Daze. Stunning a champion with an elemental weapon creates an elementally aligned explosion, applying a matching elemental debuff to them and nearby targets. So with your Ahab Char, you'll be able to stun theoretically unstoppable champs with your ignitions, and of course your overload champs with the intrinsic ability through the artifact. Last but not least, put on Radiant Shrapnel for that added rain of fire, so to speak, and make sure you put on Shield Crush. When you are Radiant, your grenade charges faster and deals increased damage, and we will be proccing Radiant all the time because we have Fever and Chill activated. Oh, and by the way, this also pairs with our fragment that says that our Restoration and Radiant effects applied to us last longer. So yes, this is the season of solar. I think we all understand that, but this build right here directly feeds every element of the build, directly feeds into another element. And some of them even play off of each other and refresh your other abilities. So all you're doing is constantly using and refreshing your abilities over and over and over again. And yes, you can do that with a lot of different builds. This one is just so much smoother and so much faster. And with endgame content on the horizon for a lot of people that are nearing the end of their power grind, you know, you're above 300, you're nearing that 350, or maybe you're slightly over 350, or maybe you're slightly over 400, you're starting to get to that pinnacle cap. This is only going to add to the validity of what I'm saying, because you're already putting out an obscene amount of power with Outbreak. You're already putting out an obscene amount of Scorch and solar damage with your Ahab Char, and you've already got your heavy weapon reserved literally just for boss DPS, and you've got a backup DPS weapon that's going to help you clean house. This build is just, it's just a chef's kiss, for lack of a better way to put it. So one of the reasons I think you should try this build is, well, to be perfectly honest, I was kind of shocked at how well Eunoia and Well work together. And the reason for that is when I was thinking of how I wanted to use my Solar Warlock this season, I really wasn't thinking well, because I don't want to be that guy that everyone has to depend on come DPS time. I also want to be the guy that is putting out ridiculous damage and has the ability to kind of carry a fire team if need be, if you're getting bogged down and you need an explosive, an explosive move from one of your players. Maybe someone pops their Song of Flame. Maybe someone throws out their Opaque Hourglass. Maybe someone activates their Hellion and starts clearing the road a little bit, so to speak, if you're pinned down. That's the kind of player I like to be, and that's the kind of player that a lot of people like to be. Probably a lot of you that are going to watch this video. But one of the things that makes this stand out is the universal feeding into each other that all of these different abilities do. And oh, by the way, you feed into the Artifictus too, which also feeds back into you as far as the ability regeneration. We talked about Radiant. We talked about the additional duration of that. We talked about fire sprites with, melee and grenade energy from doing one thing. Oh, and then we talked about a class. All of these things are literally, I mean, yes, we knew that solar was going to be the play for a lot of players, coming into this season. We knew there was a lot of solar love, and we knew that it had more love than any element currently in the artifact. We still have yet to see the last two rows unveiled. But pairing these two together has completely changed my approach to how I approach bosses in higher end game activity. And it also changes how I view my teammates, because when I'm using this build, I mean, if you think that your teammates are not playing on your side, watch how fast they come to your well when you pop it 3 times during a DPS phase. And yes, that's going to literally be the video that I show here at the closing. At the end of Devil's Lair, I'm able to get 3 of these wells back to back to back for 3 damage phases, and both of my teammates just don't leave my side, and that makes the event go by even faster. So when you're thinking about leveling up and you're thinking about how can I help myself get through these activities faster, run a well, but also run some good DPS options and watch your teammates congregate around you when the going gets tough, because they're going to look to you as the guy who's going to try to help them get their weapon damage to the next level. So you're going to make everybody happy. And oh, by the way, you're going to make yourself happy because you're going to get through the activity faster. People are going to die less. And yeah, I mean, you might even get a couple of best dressed votes. That's what I always strive for. But anyways, if you did find anything helpful in this video, please consider liking and subscribing. If you know a guardian out there who is looking for a way to incorporate the new exotic with a very good support style play with Well Lock, make sure you share this video with them or send them my way. My goal is to help as many people as possible. As always, I will have a dim link in the description of the video. And if by chance you are looking for a non-toxic gaming community, make sure you hop into my Discord. Everyone is on the proverbial power grind. Everyone's out there trying to help each other. We're bouncing ideas off of each other in our Discord community. And we're also getting psyched for Ash and Iron that's coming out here in the next release. I know there's going to be a lot to talk about, both in build videos that you guys are going to see, and then of course within the communities that you're part of with how you guys are going to approach doing harder activities, since the power cap is going to increase. So check it out if you're looking for it, looking for a good community. I highly recommend it. So I'm going to switch over to the boss battle. I may or may not play the whole thing. Actually, you know what? I'm probably going to play the whole thing because I was pretty happy with how it went. The entire run, we were like 3 separate people running through this semi-difficult strike, on master difficulty. But once the boss room hit and they saw that my well was readily available, we went through the boss way faster than we went through anything else within that strike. So I'm going to switch it over right now. So here we go, boss battle. Now I'm not going to talk through this whole thing, which I know is not stereotypical of me. Generally, I like to share my final thoughts. I'm going to let the gameplay do the talking. 3 wells in 2 minutes and 26 seconds. You guys can follow along on the timetable down below just to make sure. But come boss time, it doesn't matter what fire team you're in. It doesn't matter how the strike or the endgame activity or whatever has gone so far. Once that well drops, your fire team members, even if they are total strangers, join you and help you complete it faster. And all this is going to do is help you get that next level loot to help you level up faster, because sometimes boss rooms can take a long time if everybody is dying all the time because they're not sticking together. So I am going to stop talking and let the gameplay kind of do its thing. You'll see I don't ever once take any cover. I just kind of hang and bob and weave, and I just stay alive. So hopefully you guys like the build. Hopefully you guys like the video. Let me know in the comments how you would change it up to better suit your needs, or if you've tried this yourself. But I will see you guys next time. Take care.